internal energy, let's say IE of a system, must be balanced by the external energy received by the system and the work done. That is, du is equal to dq minus dw, where du indicates the change in the internal energy, dq indicates the heat added to the system, and dw is the work done. Okay, all right. So to visualize the work term dw, okay, in this equation, let's consider a substance. Let's say we've got a cylinder. Okay, we've got a cylinder, and inside that we've got some substance, some fluid, let us say. Okay, which is contained in the cylinder, which has a fixed cross-sectional area. Okay, that is fitted with a movable piston. So this is a piston. This is a fluid. Okay, and this has got a unit cross-sectional area or fixed cross-sectional area of this cylinder. Okay, as shown in this figure. All right. So if the piston moves outward, if you just pull the piston outward through a distance dx, let's say this is dx, the work done by the substance, okay, in pushing the external force F through a distance dx is the work done. Okay, dw, which is given by dw is equal to force times the distance, right? This is the work done. Okay, we are just pushing this piston outward, or this fluid is pushing this piston outward, then the work done will be equal to force times dx. Okay, because the force is also equal to pressure times the area, where A is the cross-sectional area of the face of this piston, let us say. Okay, so we can write dw, work done, is equal to pa times dx, which is equal to p times dv, where dv is the volume. Okay, p is the pressure, a is the area of the cross section. So we can write that the work done dw is equal to pressure times the volume, change in the volume. Okay, now the work done by the working substance, let us say fluid, in passing, let us say in this diagram. Okay, you have got the pressure shown in the y-axis and volume shown in the x-axis. Okay, so let us say if the fluid or the substance is moving from the point P to the point Q, okay, and if the change in the volume by this process is dV, okay, is dV, then the work done will be equal to this area, this shaded area. Let's say this is light blue shaded area. Okay, that is will be the work done. So this is called a PV diagram, because you have got the pressure in the y-axis and volume in the x-axis. This is called a PV diagram, in which case we can easily visualize what is the work done, okay, due to movement of this piston from a pressure P to the pressure point Q, okay, by which the change in volume is the dV. Okay, so this is called the PV diagram, and this is a very important diagram. I mean, it looks like a simple diagram, but in atmospheric science or meteorology, this is a very important diagram, because there are several applications of this diagram in meteorology, and we call it thermodynamic diagrams. We call it thermodynamic diagrams. Have you heard about this thermodynamic diagrams earlier? Have you studied
No,
about
sir.
Yes, sir.
it? No. Okay. Yeah, some of you say yes, some of you say no. Okay, so fine. We shall study in detail about this thermodynamic diagram subsequently in this class, because on this diagram, on this type of diagram, we try to plot the profiles of temperature and the humidity observed by the radiosonde, and try to analyze from there whether the atmosphere is going to be stable or is unstable, or the atmosphere is neutral. So there are a lot of applications, and there are various forms of this diagram. Okay, sometimes it's called the T5 gram, T5 gram. Have you heard about the T5 gram? Yes or no? T5 gram.
No, sir.
Okay. Well, T5 gram is a form of a thermodynamic diagram, which is very much utilized in meteorology or atmospheric science for various applications. Okay. As I said, when the Radiosonde we launch every day at 5:30 in the morning and 5:30 in the evening, twice a day, let us say. Then from the profiles measured by the Radiosonde, okay, we try to plot on the T5 gram. Every day that is plotted. Okay, nowadays everything is automatic, of course, it is plotted by a computer. But in the old days, it was plotted manually. There used to be big T5 gram charts in graphical form. And these pressure, temperature, humidity, they used to be plotted on the diagrams by the weather forecasters. And then from there, they used to analyze whether the atmosphere is stable or it is unstable or it is neutral. Okay, we shall study these things in detail subsequently in this subject. Okay, so this is a thermodynamic diagram, very basic form of a thermodynamic diagram, which we try to utilize in different forms called T5 gram or SQT log P diagram or imagram. I mean, there's several names. We try to plot the, in the X and Y axis, different things in that same diagram, which we'll study later on. Okay, so if we are dealing with a unit mass of a substance, the volume B is replaced by the specific volume. Right? You know the specific volume. Therefore, the work dW done when the specific volume increases by B alpha. Okay, alpha is the specific volume. So the work done dW will be in that case equal to dW equal to P d alpha. Okay, where P is the pressure and d alpha is the change in the specific volume. Let's say this is equation 2. Okay, if we combine this equation with the previous equation, then it can yield PQ equal to du plus PD alpha. Okay, and this is an alternative statement of the first law of thermodynamics. Okay, this is another way to state the first law of thermodynamics. The first way we have seen earlier in the previous slide. Okay, and this is another way, alternate way to state the first law of thermodynamics. We shall, use different forms of the first law of thermodynamics for different purposes according to our requirement or convenience, both in this atmospheric physics subject and as well as you will study in the atmospheric dynamics of the atmosphere. Also, you will study this first law of the thermodynamics when you are studying the governing equations of the atmosphere. There also you have to study the thermodynamic equation, because there you will be studying mostly from the point of view of dynamics, right? The equations of motions or the momentum equations of the atmosphere. And after that, you will be studying this thermodynamic equation. And also you will be studying the hydrostatic equation. Also, you will be studying the continuity equation and the equation of a state and everything. All those things you will study. Maybe you might have already studied in the dynamics of the atmosphere course. Okay. So this is very important. Okay, you have to remember. Now the next is the Joule's law. Okay, Joule's law. You must have studied Joule's law in your BSc. Have you studied Joule's law?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, can somebody explain what is Joule's law? Joule's law. Can somebody explain what is Joule's law?
Sir, Joule's law in electricity.
Tell me, what is that?
Sir, about the Joule's law in electricity.
Electricity. Define the Joule's law properly. Anybody?
I was asking about sir, H is equal to I square RT. H is equal to I square RT.
Okay, I mean, you're telling me in the form of equation. There is one form. Anybody else can state what is Joule's law?
Sir, there are two Joule's laws, sir. One for electricity and another for thermodynamics. Which one is that?
Okay,
Which
I'm
one are you
talking about
asking, sir?
thermodynamics. I'm talking about thermodynamics. Okay.
Yes. In thermodynamics, Joule's law states that the internal energy of an ideal gas is independent of its volume at a constant temperature.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is what we are going to utilize from the point of view of thermodynamics or atmospheric thermodynamics. Okay, so we are going to review it once again. So Joule's law. Okay, it says that the internal energy of an ideal gas is independent of its volume if the temperature is kept constant. That's what Deepak has said correctly. Okay. Joule's law leads to an important conclusion concerning the internal energy of an ideal gas. Okay. So I will be just state here briefly for continuity. Okay. Then comes the specific heats. This also you have studied, I know, in your BSc physics. You must have studied the specific heats, right? You have studied that or not? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Yeah. A specific heat at constant pressure or a specific heat at constant volumes. We are going to utilize these things to convert the first law of thermodynamics in different forms. So just for recall or refreshment, suppose a small quantity of heat dq is given to a unit mass of a material, and as a consequence the temperature of the material increases from T to T plus dt without any changes in the phase occurring within the material, then the ratio dq by dt, okay, dq by dt is called the specific heat of the material. Okay, specific heat of the material. Well, dq is the change in the quantity or the amount of heat given to the substance, and dt is the change in the temperature. Okay. So if the volume of the material is kept constant, a specific heat at a constant volume Cv is defined as Cv is equal to dq by dt at a constant volume. Okay, this is the specific heat at a constant volume. I'm sure all of you have studied this. Okay. However, if the volume of the material is constant, this equation becomes dq equal to du. Okay, if dV is constant, then this will be simply equal to dq equal to du, and therefore we can write Cv is equal to du by dt at a constant volume. Okay, this is the specific heat at the constant volume equal to ratio of the change in internal energy divided by the change in temperature at the constant pressure. Okay. For an ideal gas, the Joule's law applies, and therefore U depends on the temperature, where U is the internal energy, and therefore regardless of whether the volume of a gas changes, we may write Cv is equal to du divided by dt. Okay, the specific heat is equal to ratio of the change in internal energy divided by change in temperature. This is equation 4. Now from the previous equation 2a and this equation 4, we can rewrite the first law of thermodynamics for an ideal gas in this form: dq is equal to Cv dt plus Pd alpha. Simple equations you can derive yourself. Just do this exercise in your room when after the class, how to get these equations. They are simple algebraic equations, and you can always derive yourself these equations. Okay. So using this equation 4 and the previous equation 2a, we can write dq equal to Cv dt plus Pd alpha. Okay, where Cv is the specific heat at the constant volume. Okay, dt is change in temperature, P is the pressure, and d alpha is the change in the specific volume. Okay. Now the term dq is sometimes called the diabatic or non-adiabatic heating or cooling. Okay, where diabatic means involving the transfer of heat. Have you heard about the term diabatic? You must have heard, I believe. Diabatic. You have heard about the adiabatic, right? Adiabatic.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Similarly, there is diabetic. The disease, there is a disease also called diabetic. Somebody is diabetic. sugar percent. But this is another diabetic which is in the thermodynamics, right? So have you heard about this term diabetic earlier? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, sir.
So yeah. So this indicates actually the transfer of heat, okay, between two substance, or I mean in a phase change, for instance. When we say diabetic heating, that means the heat changed because of different processes, because of, say, let us say, release of the latent heat due to condensation, or the latent heat of evaporation because of evaporation process, or because of the freezing of the liquid water, or sublimation, etc. Because all these things take place in the atmosphere, right? In the atmosphere, all kinds of changes of phase occurs, right? Inside the cloud, for example, you will study later on when you study the cloud microphysics. You will be studying all these things, the cloud hydrometeors, etc., and how they change phases from one phase to another phase. So during the change of phase, now the latent heat is either released or absorbed, right? Depends upon which phase it is, whether it is a condensation or evaporation, okay, or freezing or melting or sublimation. I mean, so many processes, okay. So that means most of the time the atmospheric processes are diabetic. They're not adiabatic. Okay, adiabatic, right? Adiabatic, adiabatic? What
Yes,
is
sir.
adiabatic?
Yes,
Can you
sir.
define? Yeah, can you define what is adiabatic? Yeah,
Yes,
can
sir.
you define what is adiabatic? Can you define what is
Adiabatic process is one
no
which
transfer
involves
of
no transfer of heat.
Yes,
no
exactly.
transfer of
When there is no transfer of heat, but that is a very idealistic process, right? Idealistic process. You can have that in the laboratory, in a controlled laboratory experiment of the physics lab. You can have that in a condition in which the process is adiabatic. But in the reality, in the real atmosphere, the processes are not adiabatic, right? Because you cannot stop the transfer of heat, right? Can you stop the transfer of heat in the atmosphere? Hmm? You cannot, because everything is just in the open, in the sky, right? And so whenever there is a change of phase from liquid to the, say, gas, or from gas to the liquid, okay, or freezing or melting or whatever, then there is latent heat of condensation, latent heat of evaporation, latent heat of fusion, latent heat of melting, and so many latent heats, right? And they are going to heat the atmosphere, the surrounding air, right? The surrounding air are going to be either heated or cooled by these processes, cloud microphysical processes. They are the cloud microphysical processes, or even if there is no cloud, for instance. Now, if simple, just a moist air mass is rising up. Suppose if a moist air mass is rising up, because the air mass, moist air will have a less density, so it will rise up, right? So it will light up. So as soon as it rises up, it will start cooling, right? Because it will lose temperature as it goes high up in the atmosphere. And so once it cools, at some point of time, the condensation will start taking place, right? And because of the condensation, latent heat will be released, right? So that latent heat is going to heat the surrounding air. That latent heat, which is released because of the condensation of the water vapor, as the moist air mass is cooling because of the ascent, vertical ascent, that latent heat is going to heat the surrounding air, right? So it cannot be adiabatic, right? It cannot be adiabatic. It has to be a diabetic process. So the diabetic processes are very important. And you will see later on, once you study this subject more and more in depth, then you'll find that there are a lot of attempts or efforts made how to take into account, how to compute precisely Okay, how much is the diabetic heating rate? That is going to be the major task in your subsequent uh, uh, semesters or subsequent subjects in atmospheric science. There are a lot of methods which are applied to be able to accurately determine how much is the diabetic heating rate, because that plays a major role in the atmosphere, in the systems, in the evolution of the atmosphere, in the dynamics. Once the atmosphere is heated, the air mass is heated, then it will change the entire dynamics of the atmosphere, right? And therefore, it becomes very important how to precisely compute, how to precisely determine how much is the diabetic heating rates. And most of the times, because of the lack of the understanding of these physical processes or the cloud microphysical processes, the computations are not perfect or not accurate. And because of so many other things also, because you find that we have to make many kinds of assumptions when we are going to solve the equations of the atmospheric dynamics. Then we have to make lots of approximations, and because of those approximations, now the final solutions are not always very accurate. Okay, so we have to have a very good computer now. Very good. I mean, we say 32 bits machine or 64 bits machine. Now, some of you who have studied the computer science, two of you said that you are students of computer science, right? Who studied computer science in BSc among you? Probably Anjali.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and who else? One more, somebody else also said,
Me, sir, Vishnu, sir.
Vishnu, yes. So you must be knowing what is a 32 bits machine and what is a 64 bits machine, right? What is the difference between that? Do you know that?
Don't remember, sir. I only studied
Don't
for
remember exactly.
sake of maths, sir.
Okay.
Not interested in CS. That much.
Okay. I mean, in a simple plain language, when you say 32 bits machine, that means that machine is going to consider 32 digits after the decimal points. In simple layman's language, a 32 bits machine is going to consider 32 digits after the decimal points. And a 64 bits machine is going to consider 64 digits after the decimal points. So obviously, a 64 bits machine will be more accurate than compared to the 32 bits machine for computational purpose, right? And this is what is very important in our atmospheric science, because when you try to model the atmosphere, okay, or try to compute the future state of the atmosphere or evolution of the atmosphere in future, then you will study later on in the other semesters that you have to use some kind of numerical techniques, because these equations which you are going to solve are highly nonlinear equations that cannot be solved analytically. It has to be solved using numerical techniques. And when you use numerical techniques, then you are bound to encounter errors, numerical errors. And obviously, you will desire that you will try to consider as many decimal points, as many digits after the decimal points as possible, right? So as to make your computation more accurate, right? And that's what we do in our nowadays. We talk about the supercomputing, etc., high performance computer, etc., which the India Met Department has, or NCMRWF has, or the IITM Pune has. I mean, all the big institutes now, or anywhere in the world, which they have this big computing machines, so-called high performance computing or supercomputers. Okay, they are supposed to be more accurate and more fast also. Speed in terms of several petaflops, right? Petaflops. And also 64 bits machine, several petaflops, and then several petabytes of memory, right? So this is required for atmospheric science, because we have to determine or compute the future state of the atmosphere, right? So anyway, coming back to what we were discussing is the diabatic heating, and I just diverted because to explain the importance of diabatic heating, diabetic processes in the atmosphere. The diabetic processes are very, very important, and the big task or challenge to compute the diabetic processes accurately and the changes of states or phases, okay, in the atmosphere. So the temperature change dt is due to the diabetic effect dq, and the part due to the adiabatic process is PD alpha. Okay. So in this equation of the first law of thermodynamics, this part is the part because of the adiabatic effect, whereas this one is because of the diabetic effect or diabetic process. Okay, that's what is simple way of interpretation of this first law of thermodynamics. Because U is a function of the state, no matter how the material changes from state 1 to state 2, the change in its internal energy from this equation can be written as U2 minus U1 is equal to integration from temperature T1 to T2 Cv dt. Okay, just from this equation, just integrate this and you'll find that it gives you U2 minus U1 equal to integration from T1 to T2 Cv dt. Okay. We can also define a specific heat at a constant pressure Cp. Okay, that was the specific heat at the constant volume. You can also similarly define a specific heat at the constant pressure given by Cp equal to dq divided by dt at constant pressure. Okay, where dq is the diabatic heating rate, dt is the change in temperature, and Cp is the specific heat at the constant pressure. Okay. So the equation 5, the last equation, can be rewritten in the form dq is equal to Cv dt plus d of P alpha minus alpha dp. Let's say this is equation number 7. Simple algebraic equation. Then at constant pressure, the last term, this one, this equation, alpha dp, will vanish because the pressure is constant, suppose. If the pressure is constant, then dp will be equal to 0, isn't it? dp is the change in pressure, and if we say that pressure is constant, that means dp is equal to 0. So last term of this equation will vanish at a constant pressure. Okay, and therefore, from the previous equation 6 and this equation, we can write Cp is equal to Cv plus R. Another very important relationship utilized very frequently in thermodynamics, and this should be familiar to you, all of you. This equation, I believe, should be familiar to all of you. So the specific heats at constant volume and at constant pressure for dry air are 717 and 1004 joules per Kelvin per kilogram, respectively. Okay, this is the specific heat at the constant volume, and this is the specific heat at the constant pressure. And the difference between them is 287. Okay, Cp minus Cv is 287 because R is equal to Cp minus Cv, which is nothing but R, the gas constant of the dry air, which you have already now seen earlier. You know it earlier. Okay, so this is the difference between Cp minus Cv is equal to 287 joules per Kelvin per kilogram, which is nothing but the gas constant for the dry air. So by combining this equation 7 and this equation 8, we obtain an alternate form of the first law of thermodynamics. Now again, another form of thermodynamics written as dq equal to Cp dt minus alpha dp. So this is yet another form of the first law of thermodynamics. Okay, so you have to remember now different forms of the thermodynamics, because we shall be utilizing these equations in different forms for different purposes according to our requirement. Okay, so you have to remember these different forms of the first law of thermodynamics or thermodynamic equation. Okay. I think enthalpy also you have studied earlier, right? Yes or no? Enthalpy. Have you studied
Yes, sir.
enthalpy? Yeah. Can somebody define what is enthalpy? Can somebody remember from your BSc? What is enthalpy? Nobody remembers what is enthalpy. Okay, so you have to study. That's what I said earlier, that you have to refresh your BSc physics, especially the atmospheric thermodynamics part. Okay. Actually, now for atmospheric science, physics having the core subject in the BSc level is important. Eligibility criteria that you know, right? Because we have so many applications of physics everywhere. In atmospheric science, in atmospheric physics, you apply the laws of thermodynamics, you apply the laws of radiation, right? Radiative transfer processes. You have also studied the atmosphere, you have studied the electricity, right? You have studied the simple electricity in the BSc. Have you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes,
You
sir.
have studied the electricity. Here, you will study the atmospheric electricity. How the atmosphere gets electrified. How the atmosphere gets charged. What is the evidence of atmosphere getting charged? Can you tell me? Can somebody tell me the proof
So
that
lightning.
Lightning, sir. Lightning and thunder.
exactly lightning, thunder, right? That is the evidence or proof that atmosphere has electricity, right? So those things you are going to study in detail here. How the atmosphere gets charged, how the charge gets separated, how the potential gradient develops, how much is the voltage, how much is the transfer of current, what is the potential gradient, or what is the voltage potential gradient required for a discharge, a lightning discharge to occur, right? All those things you will be studying in as a part of the atmospheric electricity. Now, the lightning, as you said, is a visible evidence or proof that electricity exists in the atmosphere. And you will study how much current or how much voltage develops or is stored in the atmosphere. Just now, if you compute the amount of voltages or current which are stored in the atmosphere, you will be amazed that so much of voltage or current, if we can trap those things, utilize those things by developing some kind of instrument, some machine, then that itself will be sufficient to light the entire village, provide the electricity in the entire village. So much of voltage are generated. But unfortunately, we are not able to do that. Even till today, we have not been able to trap the atmospheric electricity, just like we are able to utilize the solar energy, right? We have now got solar power plants, solar cells, solar batteries, that you already know, right? Nowadays, it is utilized highly and at an industrial scale. There are many airports which are having this solar operated. Entire airport is lit by solar energy. Have you seen any airport like that? Say, for example, I don't know whether you have been to Cochin Airport. Anybody have been to Cochin Airport in Kerala? Yes or
Yes,
no?
sir. Yes.
Have you seen the solar energy or solar battery? I mean, all those reflectors which are placed.
Yes, sir. I have seen that panels they have placed over a large area.
Yeah, very large area. There are so many solar panels.
Yes, sir.
So they're able to trap the solar energy through that, right? And also not only at Kochi, North, at many airports it is there. And nowadays people also have the solar water heater on the rooftop of their building. They install, I mean, it is now industrially available. Just buy a solar water heater, install at the top of your building so that you don't have to use a geyser. Of course, in Kerala, you will not be using geyser, but in northern India, nowadays winter, we have to use a geyser or water heater to take bath. So what I'm trying to say is that we are able to trap the solar energy nowadays, and also we are able to trap the winds because there are big wind vans which generate electricity because of the winds. There are so many wind vans you must have seen. Also in Kanyakumari side, have you seen the wind vans?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Deepak. There are so many wind vans in, I mean, at many places in India. In South also, there are so many wind vans. There are windmills, wind farms, they call wind farms. And also in Rajasthan, in the western part of Rajasthan, there are so many wind farms. For miles and miles, you will find hundreds of wind vans, windmills, through which they try to extract or utilize or explore the wind energy and convert it into electrical energy, right? And this also a challenge, I mean, because this is also a part of atmospheric science. This is challenge to be able to tell, because you will read later or study later that this wind farms or wind energy producing companies, there are many companies which produce electricity through the wind. And they must know that how much electricity they will be able to produce in the next 24 hours, right? They must be able to tell the government, because the government gives them license, right? I mean, there are very interesting things now that you may or may not be knowing. Now, the electricity that we use every day in our household, right? How do we generate that? You must be knowing that, right? How do we generate electricity?
So, power plants,
Which power plant?
solar, hydro,
Yes.
wind,
Yes.
and thermal, and
Thermal.
nuclear power plants.
And nuclear program, right? So these are the different ways of generating electricity which we use every day in our life. I mean, in our life, of course. And they are all controlled by the government, right? Central Electricity Authority is the government agency. Central Electricity Authority, the government authority which controls the generation and distribution of electricity throughout the country. And there are different agencies, sub-agencies of that part of that called Power Grid Corporation, for example. Have you heard about the Power Grid Corporation? Power Grid Corporation, which is responsible for setting up the grid networks at all the cities around the country. And they're supposed to be responsible for distributing electricity, okay, in different parts of the country, different cities. And suppose, I mean, and these companies, for example, this hydro power plant, which generates the electricity from hydrology or now from the water, or thermal power plants, which generate the energy from the coal, right, burning the coal, or wind power plant, which generates energy from wind, or solar power plant, which generates energy from solar, or nuclear power plant, etc. So the government has given these agencies to different big private company industries, right? And government tells them that you have to generate this much of amount of, say, this much megawatts of electricity per day, which is the requirement for the public. Suppose in the city of Chennai or city of Delhi, the government knows that what is the consumption of electricity by the people of Delhi or Chennai or big cities, right? So government has to see that that much of demand of electricity is met by different sources, some part through the hydro power plant, some part through the thermal power plant, some part through the wind, some part through the solar, and so on. So the government will tell the agencies, the private agencies which are taken the responsibility for generating the wind power. Government has to tell them that yes, in the next 24 hours, I will be able to generate this much of electricity, right? And how will they know that how much electricity they will be able to generate in the next 24 hours? How will they know? Because that will depend upon the wind speed, isn't it? The electricity generated by the wind will depend on the wind speed, yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes. And so how will they know how much will be the wind speed in the next 24 hours? And that too, at the height of the wind vane. You know what is the typical height of the wind vane? Do you know? The typical height of the wind vane, windmill, is about 80 meters above the ground, let us say, or about 100 meters. Two types. Majority of them have wind vanes at other turbines, big turbines, at the height of about 80 meters from the ground. That means those wind producing companies must know that what will be the wind speed at the height of 80 meters, because wind speed is not constant in the vertical throughout the atmosphere, right? Is that constant?
No, sir.
No, wind speed is not constant throughout the vertical in the atmosphere. Neither it is constant throughout the time. Is it constant throughout the time?
No, sir.
It is not. Yeah. Neither it is constant throughout the time, nor it is constant throughout the height in the vertical. So how will the wind power companies will know that in the next 24 hours, how much will be the wind speed at the height of 80 meters above the ground? So they have to use some kind of atmospheric model, right? They have to use some kind of atmospheric model for that.
Yes.
Yeah. And so through that atmospheric model, they will try to forecast the wind. Say every hourly wind they will try to forecast. Next hour, up to 24 hours, or maybe 48 hours. They'll try to forecast the wind. And then only they will be able to estimate that if this is going to be the wind, then this will be the output in terms of the electricity generation. And accordingly, they will assure the government that yes, I will be able to produce this much of electricity. And the government is not so kind on them. Government is not so kind on them because government want that public should not suffer. Public should not suffer because demand of electricity depends upon the season of the year also, right? For example, in the winter season, many people will like to use the geyser in their bathroom for heating the water, or just simply room heater. Or in the summer season, many people will like to use the AC, air conditioner. So when they use the AC in the summer and heater in the winter, then the power consumption will change accordingly, increase, right? So the government has all the statistics, all the information that in winter season, in this month of the year, this much is the average requirement of electricity by the public. And out of that, this much has to be met by the, wind producing company. So they will demand from the wind company that you have to assure that you will be able to supply this much of electricity from the wind. And if the company is not able to do that, then the public will suffer because the public will not get, and then they will start doing the load shedding, right? You must be knowing that now there are a lot of load sheddings in different places where there is not enough electricity supply and the demand is very high. So then the government has to do load shedding. And because of load shedding, public suffers, right? So if the companies are not able to produce so much of energy, then government will put them penalty on the company. But why you promised that you will be able to do that, but you are not able to do. And because of this, public is suffering. So had the companies told in the beginning itself that no, we will be able to produce only this much of energy, then government will do some other method that okay, if only this much amount of electricity will be generated by wind, then the remaining requirement will have to be met by some other means, like through the thermal power plant or through the hydro power plant or through the nuclear power plant and so on. So government has to know all these things in advance, right? So that if there is a lack of energy or a reduction of the energy from one source, then it has to be met by some other source, right? So that means that now there has to be some kind of a surplus also. Unless there is surplus, how will they able to meet the demand? And if they're not able to do, then the result is load shedding, right? And because of the load shedding, again, public suffers, and then a lot of things happen after that, right? So these are the things, I mean, which are the applications of atmospheric science. I mean, in one aspect of the life, and I was actually talking about the electricity, and all these things came up. I mean, atmospheric electricity rather. So what I was trying to say that we are able to extract electricity from so many sources, but still we are not able to extract the electricity which is hidden in the atmosphere. So much of electricity is hidden, which results in so much of lightning discharge, okay, and thunder and so many things. And it is estimated, if you estimate how much energy is hidden in the atmospheric electricity, you will be amazed that so much of electricity is hidden that atmospheric electricity itself, if we are able to harness it properly, then it will be able to meet all the requirements of electricity of the country. But unfortunately, we are not able to do that. Okay, so this is one area where a lot of work has to be done, or no work has to be done so far. Okay, so I think we have to stop today, and tomorrow or next week we shall continue for this, talking about the enthalpy and other things, in detail, adiabatic process, etc. We have to study. Okay, so already 1:35. We stop. I stop sharing the PowerPoint. Stop presentation. Okay. Do you have any question till this point?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. So everything so clear, right? Is it interesting or not interesting?
Interesting.
Yes, sir, it is.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, sir. Interesting.
So much of application of all these things in the real life, right? And atmosphere is there everywhere. Without atmosphere, we can't survive at all, right? So, okay, then I stop recording for today, and then we shall meet on Monday. Okay, stop recording.